These days, there's a race to see who can put out the biggest vape cartridge and who can have the battery to meet the needs of that cartridge. And one of the main issues I see constantly online is they might buy a 3 gram or 4 gram disposable, and they're lucky if they get through a gram of it before that battery just completely shuts down or the vape is clogged so badly that it's impossible to unclog. I wasn't too sure what I wanted to discuss doing an episode by myself. James is the political expert. He's the extraction expert. He has a lot of the knowledge when it comes to the technical political side of things. Whereas I come from the consumer side, like everybody. I started out in a state where it wasn't legal. I decided to move to Colorado to pursue that career in the cannabis industry. And now a big aspect of my work is educating people on cannabis, even if they aren't in a legal state, especially now with intoxicating hemp products becoming a bigger industry than recreational cannabis products. There's more people buying cannabis than ever before, including vape pens, flower, edibles, you name it. But when it comes to knowing what you're getting, that can be a little bit tougher. And even if you're really new, how to use the products you're getting. So what I wanted to do today was specifically talk about vapes, and even more specifically, vape batteries. Because as we all know, there's no shortage of vape batteries out there that you can use. Brands like the Clear will have their own branded vape batteries that they would recommend you use with their carts. We recommend you use our batteries with our carts to get the best experience. But the reality is, you can buy a vape battery online. You could go to any head shop or smoke shop and buy a vape battery there, and it's going to work with most 510 threaded cartridges that you'll buy at a head shop or a dispensary, because most cartridges are that 510 thread. That is the standard. So no matter what cartridge you're getting, whether it's a 1 gram or 2 gram or 3 gram or 4 gram, it's likely going to fit a 510 threaded battery. But when it comes to 510 threaded batteries, there's different versions. So for those watching, I actually have a couple of our own batteries here on the table. So we have one of our older batteries that has now been discontinued, but it's great to use as an example, which is our buttonless battery. So for those watching, I'm holding it up right here. It has one of our awesome strawberry banana 1 gram carts on top. You can see this is what is considered a 10 millimeter battery. So the total circumference of the battery is about 10 millimeters, which is also the standard size for a lot of cartridges as well. So that's how you get that flush look when you screw in a 1 gram cart into a 510 threaded battery. It's not sticking out. It's not too small for the battery or anything like that. It sits perfectly. It's nice and sleek, and it looks like a pen, which is where we get the name vape pen. But because it doesn't have a button, some people can be a little confused on how it works. Now, I know what you're saying right now. I can hear you already. Oh my gosh, who doesn't understand how to use a battery, especially when it doesn't even have a button? Well, let me share with you a great little story that actually just happened a few days ago, at the time of recording this episode, that is. We received a call from an older gentleman. He had a wife who passed away last year, and she had used cannabis products. He hadn't used them himself. He was exploring some of her belongings in their bedroom and found a bag that had a cartridge in it along with one of our batteries, but the battery didn't have a button. So this is an older gentleman. Obviously, he's not Gen Z. He's not a technological native. He doesn't know how all this stuff works just right off the bat because he's used to it. So there is a segment of people out there who need guidance when it comes to how to use a basic battery. So I had to spend a few minutes on the phone with him, walking him through making sure that what he was screwing into the battery was a cartridge, making sure that it had the golden brown liquid in it. So I knew what he was actually consuming because I couldn't see. He was just talking to me over the phone. So I basically explained to him, here's what a cartridge is. This is what it should look like. Here's how the battery works. You should be able to screw the cartridge right into the battery and then just suck on it. So after a couple seconds of silence, I hear a exhale followed by plenty of coughing, which is a good sign to me that he at least got it working. And what started as an issue of somebody calling saying they don't think our battery works ended with them figuring out how to use it themselves. They're more independent in how they can use cannabis on their own now without having to rely on someone like us assisting them through the process. And they can start exploring a little bit more on their own. And I think it's a perfect case of where cannabis is headed, where it's not all about the heady OGs anymore who know all about the plant and they know about terpenes and cannabinoids and different cartridge types, different extraction types, etc. This industry is opening up to an entirely new market. It's bridging the gap between cannabis and wellness of people trying to maybe microdose cannabis and get the benefits of minor cannabinoids as they become more prevalent and we learn more about them and their benefits versus the old school ways of let's just get our hands on what we can get our hands on. As long as it gets us high, then awesome. That's all we need. We've moved on from that and we're entering the phase where cannabis is becoming more sophisticated. And with that sophistication is going to come new technologies to make consumption easier for people, more understandable for people, and just more fun in general and less intimidating, which is a major factor for people when cannabis first becomes legal in their state. You know, the intimidation of walking in to a dispensary where you know the person behind the counter is probably a consumer themselves. They're going to know more than you. You don't want to sound like a dummy when you walk in and have no idea what you're talking about. That can be intimidating. So providing the education to people where they can walk into the dispensary and say, hey, I'm just looking for a basic 1 gram cart, but I need a 510 thread battery to go with it. And I would prefer a battery that has an adjustable heat setting. And the only way you're going to get an adjustable heat setting is with a battery with a button. So our new battery from the Clear that's going to be going out across the country starting in 2025 is going to be based off of our 14 millimeter battery that we put out in 2024. So if you remember, I mentioned our first battery was a 10 millimeter. Most standard 510 thread batteries are going to be 10 millimeter. But we decided to put out a 2 gram cartridge because sometimes people want more than 1 gram. But the problem is a 2 gram cartridge is, what do you know, double the size of a 1 gram cartridge. So when you screw that 2 gram cartridge into a 10 millimeter 510 threaded battery, the cartridge is going to have overhang on that battery. It's bulkier than the battery itself is, and that can look a little awkward. It can get caught on stuff in your pocket maybe a little more often, but really, when it comes down to it, it's the aesthetics. You want it to look good and work well at the same time. So what's great about the 14 millimeter battery is that it's thicker, so it supports the weight of the 2 gram cartridge a little better. It makes it a little more sturdy versus the 10 millimeter battery, where having a heavier, more top-heavy cartridge on top is going to make it more likely to fall over. Having a battery that's of equal circumference puts more supporting weight underneath of the cartridge, so it's less likely to fall over when you're using it. With that said, I will never not recommend what I'm holding in my hand now. For listeners, it is what we call a cart stopper, or a pot sticker is a nickname we give them here. It's basically a little rubber grommet that you can put over your cartridge to protect it in case it falls over on your coffee table or something. And it's just a little piece of rubber that can slide right over the cartridge. It has a magnet on it, so you can store it on your refrigerator to keep it upright. If you have metal legs on your coffee table, you can hang it on the coffee table to keep it upright. You can throw it on the dashboard in your car to keep it upright while you're driving, all those things. And it just makes it a lot easier, one, to keep track of it because you can put it somewhere and know it's not going to roll away. And two, if it does happen to fall over on your coffee table, it's a lot less likely to shatter. But that's all aside from the point. We were talking about batteries, weren't we? So this 14 millimeter battery has a button, and this button gives you 2 different heat settings. Some batteries might give you 3 different heat settings. Some might even give you 4 different heat settings. Other batteries, like buttonless batteries or most disposables, will only have 1 heat setting that is not adjustable. So what we have here with our 14 millimeter battery and the button is 2 separate heat settings, and technically it is a low and high setting, but because we explicitly study the temperatures that best showcase the flavors of our terpenes without damaging them, our high temperature is really closer to a medium temperature where you can still get bigger clouds with it, but you're not going to risk overheating the oil, causing any damage to the terpene profile or anything like that that might end up affecting the flavor down the road as your cartridge gets lower. So that's why people really enjoy batteries with buttons, mainly because it gives you more control. Where with a disposable or a buttonless battery, whatever the heat setting is programmed into that battery is the heat setting that you're going to get every time you take a puff. TWAX Talk is brought to you by TWAX, by The Clear. If you don't know, TWAX is infused pre-rolls utilizing full premium flower, never shake or trim, combined with the well-known flavors of oil provided by The Clear to create some incredible tasting pre-rolls like lime sorbet or banana cream or some of the classics like OG and lemon haze. If you live in a state with legal cannabis access, go to your dispensary and keep an eye out for TWAX on the shelves. So when it comes to heat settings on vape batteries, most of them will typically have 3 settings, and the voltage on these settings for how hot it could be can range from 2.7 volts on the low end up to 3.6 volts on the high end, which, while that might not sound like a lot, really makes a difference going from 2.7 to 3.6. And if you've ever had a battery that has, the white button setting, the green button setting, and the red button setting, when you're hitting that red button setting that it's going to be hot. You're going to feel it in your throat. You might get a really big rip, but it's going to be a lot harsher. And what that does over time of hitting a vape battery at the high setting, if that's all you used, you're going to degrade and damage the oil a lot more and a lot quicker because the oil is meant to be vaporized at a certain setting. And what we did at The Clear is we made our battery so it doesn't go above the setting where we want our oil to be vaporized. So our low setting may be that 2.6 volts. Our medium setting may be the 3.1, 3.2 volts, but we're not going above that and providing any sort of setting where when you hit it, it's going to burn the hell out of your throat and it's going to be super hot. And I think anybody who's a real connoisseur, quote unquote, of vape pens most likely prefers a battery with a button or a battery that just has an adjustable heat setting. There may be some Palm style batteries out there that don't have a button necessarily, but they do have some buttons to adjust the heat itself. So there is that option as well. But what more people are smoking on today than cartridges is disposables. And why not? Go into the dispensary, buy it, finish it, toss it. You don't have to worry about holding on to the battery. You don't have to worry about refilling a cartridge or anything like that. It probably doesn't hurt that the rise of nicotine vapes runs a similar business model, and that's one of the fastest growing markets right now, if probably not surpassing regular traditional cigarettes at this point. So I think a lot of people who are coming from that side of using nicotine, when they see a disposable vape option, it seems a little more natural to them. And that's why they're becoming so much more popular these days. So we have our original line, which is one that most people should be familiar with. That's our cartridges. We came out with a all-in-one disposable a year or two ago that has become very popular in multiple states. But we have a new line that just launched in Colorado at the end of 2024 called the Effects line. And for those watching, that's this cute little vape right here. For those listening, it's a nice light blue vape, soft touch feeling, nice and thin. It doesn't look like any other disposable vape you've seen in the cannabis industry, and I can promise you that. But what makes these different is really the hardware. That's what it comes down to, especially when it comes to disposables. These days, there's a race to see who can put out the biggest vape cartridge and who can have the battery to meet the needs of that cartridge. And one of the main issues I see constantly online and hearing from consumers is they might buy a 3 gram or 4 gram disposable, and they're lucky if they get through a gram of it before that battery just completely shuts down or the vape is clogged so badly that it's impossible to unclog. So what we've done with our vapes is basically sourced the best possible hardware that we can. That includes silicon, which any of you heady folks out there may be familiar with. They're very reputable in this industry as having some of the highest quality hardware that you can buy. And we source all of their hardware for our cartridges and our original line batteries. But with our effects line, we went with something completely different. And we wanted to create something that helped bridge that gap, like I mentioned earlier, between wellness and cannabis, where some people, they want to consume cannabis, get the benefits of THC and other cannabinoids without getting super stoned. They don't want everybody to know they're getting stoned. If they're just walking down the street and they want to take a little puff before they go into the coffee shop, they don't want a giant metal duck-billed cartridge that is super obvious when they take it out to take a puff. Anybody walking by is going to be able to see it or smell it. And so what the Clear Effects line is designed for is discretion for the consumer who wants something that's going to get the job done. It's not going to go overboard on them, but they can enjoy the product without having to worry about other people seeing what they're doing, smelling what they're doing, noticing that they're super stoned. And that's because compared to our original line, which starts at 85% THC, our effects line, our vapes, start around 45%. And that's because we're infusing minor cannabinoids like CBC and CBG, CBD, which you're all familiar with, but then some other ones like THCV and CBN. And all these chemicals have their own benefits, but you only have so many cannabinoid receptors in your brain, which means sometimes certain cannabinoids can be competing with THC for that real estate, and the THC can actually inhibit the ability of other cannabinoids to have an effect. So by lessening the amount of THC to make room for those minor cannabinoids, you get the benefits of those minor cannabinoids without getting stoned from the THC. And that's the entire goal of the effects line. What makes this great is it's also our first 1 gram disposable vape. But that's not all. It's buttonless, it's set to one setting, but one thing that we hear from consumers all the time, especially when it comes to buttonless vapes, is when you're hitting it, how do you know it's working? I know, yeah, it's obvious if it's working because you're going to blow out vapor. That's obvious. But there's sometimes when you're hitting a vape, and you might still be getting vapor, but the light's not going off. Or you might be pulling on it and the light's going off, but you're not getting any vapor. So what we did is made it as obvious as possible that when you are hitting this vape, you know it. So there's actually an LED ring on the bottom of this vape. And for you watching at home, you can see as I demonstrate right now. For those of you who are just listening, I was demonstrating how our effects vape actually works, which is when you hit it, the LED ring at the bottom lights up with a bright white LED. When I say this thing's bright, I'm not joking. If you decide to take your dog out for a walk at night and you need a little light to see in front of you, take a couple puffs off this vape and you will see just how bright it is. Maybe not ideal for being discreet in the movie theater, but if you're just out and about, and you want to know that your vape is working, our LED indicator is going to make sure that you know. And really, that's what it comes down to with batteries is apart from the different types you can get, as always, it just comes down to your personal preference. Maybe you don't care so much about heat settings. You just want a battery that's going to work. You can screw in the cartridge and get right to it, not have to worry about making any adjustments or anything like that. Then maybe a buttonless battery is best for you. But if you want a little more control over your vape experience, you want a little more terpy experience, or you just want those hot, heavy clouds, a battery with a button is going to be able to do that for you, where a buttonless battery just can't. And the same goes for disposables. They're most likely not going to have that adjustable heat setting for you either, but they're typically set at an average heat setting where it's not going to be too hot. You can still get a decent hit off of it, but it's not going to completely make you cough up a lung. Now, I am aware that there's plenty of other unique novelty battery types out there, especially these days with more people buying, Delta 8 vapes and stuff like that from the local head shop. There's more discrete battery options that might look like a set of car keys or something discreet you can slip the cartridge into so you can bring it into a baseball game or something like that without people knowing. And batteries like that are a lot more focused on, obviously, the look of the battery over the performance of it. So while it might be a good battery for sneaking into a baseball game or something like that, you might find out very quickly that it doesn't function the way you want it to when it comes to how a standard battery operates. So that's something to be wary of. And like I had mentioned, there's also palm batteries instead of your standard 10 millimeter, 14 millimeter standing batteries. That's a little small square that might fit in your hand, and you can just drop the cartridge in. It might be magnetic, and some of those have a button, some of them don't. And in the end, as I'll always continue to say, is it's just going to come down to your personal preference, especially when it comes to batteries and how you want to consume your cannabis. You know, you might not even want to use a vape. For all I know, I don't know you. You don't really know me either, I guess. But I personally am a flower guy, which is funny coming from a guy who works for a company who makes vape pens. But everybody has their preferences. So I'm personally always going to choose flower over a vape just because that's what I prefer. But when I'm vaping, I want more control over the experience because that's how I am with my flower too, is I'm more picky about the flower I buy because I care about the terpenes and cannabinoid content of a given strain, and I know what effects they can provide, and I can seek out those effects myself. And the same goes for vapes. And just having a battery, in my opinion, makes it that much easier to control the hit, where if I'm just hanging out, I want a light little puff, I can do it on the lower heat setting. But as the night goes on, maybe I'm trying to get a little more wild with it, I can turn that heat setting up and really blast off, And sometimes that's just what you're looking for. And if you're doing a buttonless battery, you're not going to be able to do that. So if I had to pick one, I would obviously say you should buy the Clear's new 14 millimeter Pro Max battery. All of our new cartridges coming out in 2025 are actually going to be a 14 millimeter format. So they're going to be shorter and stockier. They're almost all going to look like our original all-in-one disposable that you may already be familiar with, but with unscrewable cartridges. So we're really excited to bring that out to you and excited to get you to try it and hear what you think about it. And we luckily have the battery to match. So we're very excited to hear your feedback on all of our new hardware as it comes out. And we're curious to hear what your preferred battery type is, what you like to use. Do you prefer disposable? Do you have a buttonless battery? Button battery? Do you hate vaping altogether and don't even bother? Why are you listening to this podcast then? I don't know. But we want to hear what you think. And I want to thank you for taking the time, joining me today on this little solo episode here. Hopefully in the next one, we'll have James back and we can pick his brain more about the dirty details about cannabis and this industry and politics and all that good stuff. But I hope this nice little, well, I'm not going to call it a filler episode. I'm a whole person, I came up with this podcast on my own. I did all this stuff. So I think it's pretty good, So if you like it, please subscribe, rate it on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. Follow us on social media. Our main channel on most platforms is at The Clear Brands. And we actually just launched a new social account for The Clear Effects, which is our new line. So that's The Clear, as you can see behind me, EFX. That's our new line. It's going to be coming out across the country starting in 2025. So keep an eye out for that. TWAX Talk is brought to you by The Clear Brands. Started in 2013 in Colorado, for over a decade, The Clear has been providing top-shelf premium distillate vapes to a wide range of markets across the country. If you're looking for a vape that provides the best experience possible without cutting corners, you want to try The Clear Brands. Now, when it comes to distillate, none of it is created equally. You can find $5 distillate and you can find higher end distillate like The Clear. And the difference really comes down to how it's processed. And the reality is that cheaper distillate, they're not putting as much effort and time into processing it, and you're getting a less clean, pure product in the end that's not going to taste as good. It's going to burn more quickly. It's going to clog up more quickly. And in the end, you're going to end up just wasting money on a low tier product. So if you're interested in a cartridge or an all-in-one that's going to last longer, taste better until the last drop, thanks to the premium hardware that The Clear provides, Head over to your local dispensary in a legal recreational state and ask your bud tender if they carry vapes by the clear.